And please give a very, very warm welcome to Colette Lumière. It is incredibly exciting that we have Colette Lumière here in Munich. You will hear in the talk that actually Colette has spent a considerable amount of time in this city. We basically going to talk about that, but about the many different identities of Colette. Colette Justine, better known as Colette Lumière, is a Tunisian-American multimedia artist and one of the great pioneers of performance art. What I think is so exciting is that for almost, I would say more than 5 decades now, Colette has basically invented many different identities. We're going to hear later from Mecha Talk, going to continue with music here at DLD later about the avatarization and the many identities online. Colette has done this in an analog way ever since the 70s. And maybe we can begin with the beginning, because it actually all began with rooms and street paintings. You began to paint in the street, but then went into a room and created a legendary room. It's, in German, one would say, a Gesamtkunstwerk. It's a total work of art. It's an inner sculpture. And all of a sudden, you started to live in this inner sculpture, and in a way became the living sculpture. Can you tell us about these beginnings from street art, from outside to the inside to the room, and how you then came up with this extraordinary idea of you actually being the sculpture?
I'll do my best, you know. I've always worked for my intuition, and to be honest, I always felt like I'm listening to a voice and I'm a transmitter. I'm a messenger, and I try to trust that voice. So from the beginning, that's how it started. I had a calling. So actually I experimented. You know, I was a painter first, but then very soon after, I started including myself even in the canvas in my early paintings. We would be here hours if I showed you all the material. But anyway, to fast forward, I started experimenting with space, which actually was going on at the time, but I was not really in the art world. I was very young, but soon after I met everyone. But I was painting on the streets, outer, and inward, which was my own home. I created my own artwork in my own home. And I kept transforming it for years, just like a painter who has a canvas and has to keep repainting it because there's no other canvas available. So it was very, very obsessive in a way. And then I was discovered for doing both. Actually, I was discovered for the street works because the police got hold of me, and eventually the public found out who I was, before Banksy, okay? So that said, the rooms came immediately after because I had people come in and they said, oh, we have to exhibit this. So my first, let's say, big show, I had done it before, was at a gallery that exhibited my stand women, these gigantic self-portraits, 16 of them in one room. And the other room, one of the images you saw before, which was an entire room. It was called The Transformation of the Sleeping Gypsy Without the Lion. And a lot of these rooms had audios, and I can't describe what you would feel when you would enter these rooms, but it was all about altering your state to a higher state. And for me, that's art, that's magic. And then I continued to do it. You know, I continued to do the streets, I continued to do the rooms. I was invited in different countries and galleries, and I always welcomed the alternative space. Although I was already well known and I really didn't have to do that anymore, I like the idea of the experimentation. I like the idea of unorthodox art spaces as much as I love having a museum show. So this is one of them in Cologne, Germany, 1977. At that time, the art world was less commercial, and they invited performance artists to do something. And I created this room that I inhabited for 7 days. You could see it through a veil. And I would just live there, just like I did at home a little bit, with my art, my works, and that was the work.
We talked earlier about long duration. This is very, extremely early form of long duration, extreme performance art. You were the sculpture within the sculpture, and then you died, and then you were reborn. Can you tell us about that? Because basically, you resurrected after your death as Justine, and Justine became your first living persona. We saw Justine earlier here in the images. And that name was, of course, inspired by the word justice in Latin. And what is interesting is actually that you posed as a fashion designer there. So we have to think, we are in the 1970s, and that is really early. Today, we have so many bridges between the art world, the fashion world. Again, you did something very pioneering there. Tell us about this resurrection after your death.
Well, that resurrection, to be honest with you, was made out of necessity. Well, not really, because art is all about transformation. So how was I going to transform a nightmare into a dream? The nightmare was that, sorry to say, the commercial world was very influenced by my vision, because unlike most artists, I can only think of Warhol, I had a public presence from the beginning, because one of my goals was to reach larger audiences. Although I should know better, because we know inventors and artists, usually it takes a little time for the public and popular culture to follow, but it does. So I invented my death, and I became Justine of the Colette's Death Company, the marketing genius who was imitating and was inspired by Colette's look, because I was already known for my look. Is that clear? And I did windows. This was Fiorucci, a very popular, franchise in New York, and everybody went there to go shopping. And actually, 1 year later, he asked me to do a line because he saw that even the designers in the store were imitating my look with the products. So he says, why don't you do a line? I did it as an artwork. I was not really interested in going into the business of fashion because art took enough of my life.
And you also did the disco punk church club. That is again in the early 80s.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that very special club?
Actually, the first one, I used that term because, how do I explain this simply? It was actually Justine, and the first one was at the newer mirror room in Graz. Do you know it, in Austria? It's this beautiful room with mirrors, and there I created Justine's Disco Punk Church Club, because I love to play with opposites, and I did an LP. I posed as an art star, and I posed as a fashion designer, all influenced by the dead Colette, So that was my first Justine Disco Punk Church Club, and it was an installation, and I don't have it here, but it continued. I continued to use that term.
And then your German chapter started. You came in 1984 through the DLD, like many other international artists came to Berlin through the DLD. We should never underestimate the importance the DLD played to make Berlin a global art scene, because so many artists came and stayed. And there you invented another persona, Mata Hari and the stolen potatoes.
Now, there we go.
Exactly. And you did there also operas in Berlin. It caused some scandals. Tell us about your time in Berlin, which then led to Munich.
Okay, well, it was a very important time for me because I had taken down the living environment. It was that time, but also the landlord was not happy and wanted me out. And lo and behold, I got an invitation to go to Berlin for 1 year, which was the perfect place to have the right support to reinvent myself. And I created a whole series under this title, Mata Hari and the Stolen Potatoes. They were gold potatoes, the whole idea of transforming something very ordinary to something extraordinary, which is what art does, right?
And then for those of you who were in Munich from 86 to 1990, you have the image here, you will have encountered Colette Lumiere under the identity of the Countess Reichenbach. So you moved from Berlin, you liked Germany, you stayed in Germany, you came to Munich, and you said you were a bit like a fish out of water at the beginning in this town. And yeah, you assumed this identity of a countess here, and these became three-dimensional works, it became a whole body of work. Tell us about the Princess Reichenbach and your time in Munich.
Okay, so Munich is a place for the aristocracy. King Ludwig, they love King Ludwig, but let's remember, King Ludwig had a hard time. So I didn't have it as easy as I thought at the beginning, but I was welcome. And it was a new place to explore, you know, which is always great for an artist. So this is me doing a performance in the Mirror Room after Paris, you know, de Versailles. And maybe more images, I can explain more. So immediately they asked me to do windows. This is not the best pick, but it's one of the picks from the Ludwig Beck windows. I did the windows, and then I had my studio. In Munich, I did Lodenfrei. I did a lot of things you're not going to see. This was an installation I did at Danny Keller. It was called Don't Look Back, which is New Beginning. Oh, and then, maybe you want to tell them.
No, tell us. We want to hear, because a scandal happened.
Okay, so then what happened is...
It happened in the casino restaurant?
That's where I had the opening.
Yeah.
That was a scandal. No, the idea was, I was very welcome in a way in Munich, but I felt like, first of all, you have to remember I'm a woman that started in the 70s. That was already going against the grain. It was the 80s, a little bit better. So people welcome. I was this artist from New York, but I would be invited to a lot of parties and events. And quite honestly, I love parties and events. But to be an artist, you'd be surprised how much time you need to spend by yourself. So I didn't appreciate it sometimes. I felt, okay, that's enough parties. Like, what about my art? So, they didn't seem to really get my art, but they got that I was an artist and I was somebody. So I said, I'm going to make art out of this, just like I made art out of, Justine, I created a scandal service, Dal C Colette for Scandal. And actually, we had the opening at the casino, which was a scandal in itself. And I had all these people dressed up in my clothes of the time, and cakes and cactus, and all kinds of props to create scandals. And I treated it like it was really going to be a business. But of course, I had no intention to be in the business of scandal any more than I wanted to be a fashion designer, although there's nothing against, I have nothing against that, but my focus was art. So I created images after that, but I had to change my phone number because people took it literally. So these images actually are from a recent exhibition showing some of the scandal work. So Colette dress, images I did from the concept, like a doctor going to work. Oh, what do we have here? Oh, this is the last work I did in Munich, and it's called Visits to the Normal World. And if you notice, I put the art on the plates, and my gold potato from Berlin was being hovered by two crows who was protecting it, gold, art. So I can't put in words what art does visually, because that's the whole idea. But maybe you can make sense out of it. But it's called Visits to the Normal World. So be careful if you touch that gold potato.
Thank you. Now, after the scandals in Munich, and it really fits so well the topic of this year's DLD. It's going to be wild. These were very wild moments in Munich. I read online that cakes flew through the room. You then returned to New York, and you basically went back to your legendary atelier on Pearl Street. And what was in Munich, the Reichenbach Palace, morphed into the House of Olympia.
Olympia, right here. the picture before was also from there. So I only have a couple of images from the House of Olympia. I returned to New York. I always would come back, but I was in Munich most of the time. And so I realized, more imitation. Oh no, now what? So I did the House of Olympia. It was a time where the sexes were having a hard time, you know, like, should I have my cigarette lit? Should I have my door open? And actually, I was encouraging that because I felt none of this said you were not liberated, you know? So I went to the 18th century for inspiration and the return of chivalry and good manners, art that celebrates life, elevates the spirit, which I think art, this is one great reason for art. And then I also use a Colette mannequin sculpture very often to replace my presence because it was very tiring to lay there for a long time. And this was the Guggenheim Museum for the art fashion show with one of my costumes from years before at the Mud Club performances and Studio 54.
And I remember we came to see you a couple of years ago. You had an exhibition at Company Gallery.
Oh.
That was our first encounter. I came there with Klaus Biesenbach. We both came to visit you, and in the exhibition, you kind of almost lived in the exhibition. And you explained me there that you explained us that Colette Lumiere, you're now Colette Lumiere, had to do with a trauma. It had to do with what happened on September 11th. Can you tell us about that transformation and how you became Colette Lumiere?
Okay, you're looking at a Lumiere image that came a little later. She was born 2001 actually she was born in Berlin, but I couldn't use a name until September 11th, then it was very clear, we need light. So light became the inspiration. The personas are inspirations. They're also a guiding light. They also separate me, make my art more objective, so it's not so personal. So Lumière, as we know, is what we really need right now. So it continues, and I lost my loft, and it became Laboratoire Lumière. Continue, and then I can fill in more.
Can you tell us what you're working on now, right now? You also had a residency in France.
Oh, yes.
But now you're back in New York. What are you working on now? What's happening in the studio now?
Okay, can you go back? So this was a room that Lumière did in Tokyo. It was a Gesamtkunstwerk, you would call it, but it was an entire floor in a fashion art building because, as you know, in Tokyo, they don't separate so much between art and fashion. So there I had clothes, I had art, I did the installation, I had multiples, I had CDs, because all along I had bands. You know, like in Berlin, I had a band. But I didn't want to go into that, would be here forever. So Lumière went to Paris. Lumière went to a lot of places because Lumière lost her loft, her legendary environment. But the exhibition you saw was a reconstruction of all these earlier works. I was so happy you saw that. And right now, well, I think art is an experiment. That's the difference between me and a lot of artists. I always think I'm a process artist, so I'm the perfect example for that. Every day, every minute is part of a process. This is a room I did at PS1, which was for, I don't want to say, but 40, which is the celebration of PS1 after the opening 40 years ago. So I did an installation called There's a Mermaid in the Attic, and I did another installation within it, which was a homage to Duchamp, but Back to the Future, right? That's what you, fast forward. Oh, this is a series I did in Africa that I showed recently. Okay, so to the present, I would love to do more installations. I would love to collaborate more with people. I kind of go back and forth between doing old-fashioned medium like painting. I never totally abandoned painting, but I always do these drawings. They're like almost like a diary. And I also record my life, at first in cards, and then I did in album covers. And I want to keep creating. At the same time, I'm very concerned with preserving my history.
And that leads us to the very last questions. I was very curious, we're going to hear in a while from Mechatalk, who is a musician working now with technology and avatarization, multiple identities. I was kind of wondering how for you, because obviously a generation who grew up with the internet, how is for you, what does technology mean? Does technology change the way you work? What about AI?
Well, that's too long a question, but I will tell you my personal feelings, okay? Number one, I'm a dinosaur, okay, when it comes to this. So for me, it's been a huge challenge. At the same time, of course, I appreciate what it has to offer, but that's why I want to collaborate with younger people. I have great hope in younger people because they can help me in that way, and we could put our minds together, because there's always a dark side to everything positive. And for me, personally, as an artist, I need my solitude. That's why I call it the laboratoire lumière. Anyone that works with me knows I have to keep to myself. So I think the problem with AI, if I'm not a tech genius, so this is not my field, I think we need to be human. And this is where the fear comes from. We can't be worried about AI. We need to worry about ourselves, each one of us, to clean up our own backyard, because as long as we're having wars and killing each other, what do we expect AI to do? Copy us. That's my personal view. So at the same time, I'm going back to drawing in a big way. I'm totally into the humanity and the textile, everything that's very human. At the same time, I would welcome somebody who would help me, with technology. So the last images, which you don't have here, I think I texted you, is one of a cyborg, and my work is prophetic. So I didn't say that, but a lot of works I've done were prophetic, but I didn't see it till after, because I think artists are mediums. You have to kind of receive something from above and be able to transmit it in a way that is powerful, the visual language. And about popular culture, it's very ironic that I have a pop star before me, because she was wonderful. I didn't know her, and I truly enjoyed her. But there's always this thing with me where I'm always blurring the line between art and life, art and commerce, dreams and reality. And it seems to me art is a touchy subject because it's about invention. And we know inventors usually haven't had such an easy time. Even the great ones, like the great artists like Joseph Beuys, were not discovered, if they're lucky, till later. So let's hope I'm that lucky. But now the forces are coming together. This is wonderful to be here. At the same time, it worries me a little bit, because there's so much information, and I worry because I need to focus, and this is the part, I don't like to say worry. I don't want to worry about anything. Like you say, joy is very important, and fear is contagious, and so is joy. So let's stay joyful.
There couldn't be a better conclusion. A big round of applause for Colette Lumière.